Okay, user-defined functions in MATLAB. So do-it-yourself functions. MATLAB and most other programming languages will include many built-in commands and functions of their own, but sometimes that doesn't cover what you're looking for. For example, if you've got a custom system of calculations, if you want to be able to reuse an algorithm across many inputs, doing the same set of processing to more than one input, or if you just want to clean up your code by combining a series of commands into a single easy to read line and kind of put some of the details somewhere else behind the scenes to keep your main body of code a little more organized and clean. In such cases, it is useful to define your own function. Now, defining your own function, the biggest thing for MATLAB, you generally will create an M file with the same name as your intended function. And in the first line of that M file, you put in a special definition structure. It'll look something like this, where the first line begins with the word function, and you've got some other details that we'll walk through step by step. There are other ways to do this, and many other programming languages use other forms of custom functions, and there's a couple of different ways to do it in MATLAB, but this is the most straightforward. So let's break this down a little bit. The first line, the word function comes first. MATLAB will helpfully highlight that in blue for you. Then in brackets, you list the outputs expected of the function. Now, there could be one output, there could be no outputs, or there could be any arbitrary number of outputs. Just put them in brackets. If there's no output, just put an empty set of brackets right there. Put an equals sign, and then give the name of the function. Okay. In this case, I've named the function nameIt because lack of creativity there. You have to follow some valid naming rules. It can't start with a number. Special characters aren't allowed. There's a couple other rules that MATLAB makes you obey. You can't overwrite a pre-existing function. So you, for example, couldn't name this function tan as in tangent, because that would conflict with MATLAB's existing tangent function. Then following the function name, in parentheses, you have your collection of inputs. It can be one input, it can be no inputs, it can be however many you would like. Okay, just put them in parentheses, separate them by commas. Okay, so that first line kind of defines the function structure for MATLAB's purposes. Now, what's going on inside the function? An important thing to note, variables created in the body of the function don't exist. So for example, in this nameIt function, step 1 and step 2 do not exist after the function is done operating. The only things that go back to the code happening outside the function are those listed as outputs to the function. Okay, in this case, output 1 and output 2. And during the operation of the function, you must define what those outputs are going to be based on the names they are given in that first line. Okay, so in this case, I've named them, again, lacking creativity, output 1, output 2, and you'll see there are two lines here where output 1 and output 2 are directly assigned values. Okay. Sorry about that. The help lines, immediately following that first function definition line, you can and should include a comment or a collection of comments that describe what the function does and how to use it, listing the inputs, describing the outputs. What happens is after you've saved that function, you can type help and the name of the function, and whatever you put in those comment lines will show up as help documentation for your function. This is how it is done in the built-in MATLAB functions as well. So for example, you type help log, and MATLAB will give you a description of how it calculates a natural logarithm based on one input and one output. Okay, so keep that in mind. That can be very useful if you're writing a function for somebody else to use. Now, finally, at the end of the function, you write the word end. Now, if this function is by itself in its own M file, it isn't strictly necessary to include the end statement. However, it's a very good idea regardless. It kind of sets an end cap on the whole operation. And that's it in a nutshell, how to define your own function with however many inputs and outputs you need. You can do any sort of MATLAB code within the body of the function, keeping in mind that all of those results will disappear unless they're listed as an output from the function. And hopefully you find this useful.